Hello everyone and welcome to a game a lot of you have suggested already, and for very good reasons. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Nihal Sarin, and I've included their handles on Chess24 in case you want to go check out their games. It's Bogues, of course, most of you know Carlsen's, but it's Nihal Sarin, all lowercase, for good Nihal Sarin here. And it's from Carlsen's Banter Blitz session that took place yesterday, and it's it's quite the game and quite the opening that was used. So without further ado, I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. Let's check it out. So Magnus opens with e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4. Carlsen goes for the Italian game. Bishop to c5, the Gioco Piano, and now we have it, b4, the Evans Gambit, and yes, in this position it was in fact played. So really excellent stuff. Maybe today it will not be used in a classical game, or maybe even in a rapid game, although some grandmasters still use it in rapid. For a 3-minute blitz game, it's more than enough. So b4, asking Nihal, do you want to accept the gambit? So he does. Bishop captures on b4, and the Evans is one of those gambits that is best refuted if accepted. So c3. Now preparing to grab space in the center, and basically asking, where do you want to go with the bishop? Bishop here, or maybe here, maybe even here. C5 is not all that great. Basically, it's a choice between a5 and d7, but in modern days, in the era of engines, even bishop to d6 became an option. But okay, bishop to a5, going for the older continuation. But we have d4 by Magnus and d6 now, not going for any pawn grabbing. Maybe in Morphy's time, we would definitely see captures, queen b3, then after this is defended, and maybe black would even capture on c3, and so on. Some very famous Adolf Anderssen games in those lines. But okay, Sarin defends with d6. We have queen to b3, now putting pressure on f7, and the queen to d7, now defending. Much better than queen to e7, as queen to e7 allows d5 for white, and then you don't really have any squares for the knight to go. If you kick it away with d5, the knight has nowhere to go. You'd have to go either here, which is bad, or maybe to b8, which is a starting square. So leaving the option if white decides to go d5, but d captures on e5 by Magnus. And now, while recapturing is perfectly fine for black, bishop to b6 is the strongest move for black here. Nihal shows that he knows some theory behind the Evans Gambit. So e captures on d6, Magnus grabs another pawn. The point is, you want to free the a5 square for the knight to get a double attack on the queen and the bishop, and to eliminate white's light square bishop, which is extremely strong. So e captures on d6, and now knight to a5 with queen to b5, offering a queen trade. Knight captures on c5, Magnus has to recapture. Queen captures, and now c captures on d6. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with queen captures on d6. Seems like a reasonable thing to do. You keep your pawns intact, but for a 3-minute blitz game, you kind of don't want to meet any moves you don't know how to handle. So c captures, although it creates an isolated pawn, is a safer option. Now you're just ready to go develop the knight, castle. You don't have to worry about e5 and so on. So here Magnus castled, and here we have knight to e7. There is a game from 1964, simultaneous exhibition in New Orleans, where knight to f6 was played, where the player with the white pieces was Bobby Fischer. He was holding the simultaneous exhibition, and Fischer actually lost that game to Parham. After it was a very nice game. We still haven't covered it, but we will at some point. So that's a possibility. Knight f6, but knight to e7 is a new move by Sarin, and it is as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. So Magnus continues in the style of the Evans Gambit. Bishop to a3. You of course always want your dark square bishop on this diagonal. Well, most of the times. We have castles, and now rook to d1, piling up on the d6 pawn, but Nihal decided long ago that this is a 3-minute blitz game, we're not going to be counting pawns. Queen to g4, he goes for the attack. He wants to bring the knight here and start an attack against the white king, with the bishops pointing in the right direction, of course. So Magnus grabs it, bishop captures on d6, and the bishop can now retreat to g3. It will be a valuable defensive piece. We have bishop to e6, grabbing more development in, preparing to bring the rook into the game. Queen back to e2 by Magnus, and now knight to g6. So now the knight can either come to maybe to f4 in the future, or maybe even to h4. We have h3 by Magnus, kicking the queen away, queen to h5, and now knight b to d2, preparing knight to f1, followed by knight to g3 to further kick away the queen. We have rook f to d8 by Sarin, and now knight to f1, preparing knight to g3 like we mentioned. And here, like I said, the bishop will be a valuable defensive piece if it goes back. So here, Sarin decides to go all out. Rook captures bishop on d6. We have rook captures, and now the f4 square is no longer guarded by the bishop, so knight to f4 comes with an attack on the queen. And here you have to be very careful. The queen has to go to d1. It's the only good square for the queen, and this is what Carlsen does, because you have to keep an eye on the knight. Otherwise, if you move the queen away from the defense of the knight, you allow bishop captures, then you remove the defender of the knight, then queen captures knight, and so on. So Magnus goes for the absolute best move, queen d1, and now bishop captures on h3. Sarin still goes for it. Now, feel free to pause the video and decide whether it's okay to capture the bishop while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that no, it is most certainly not okay to capture the bishop. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, here Magnus just continued knight to g3, and it is in fact the best move. Point is that if the bishop is captured, you run into knight captures with check, king has to move. Otherwise, if you go to the h file in front of the queen, then just knight delivers a discovery, picks up the queen. So king g2 is basically your only move, but now knight captures on f2. And now you don't really have a move, because you're either losing the queen, or if you move the queen, let's say queen e2, doesn't really matter, just queen h3 check, followed by king g1, and queen to h1 will be mate. So after bishop captures on h3, Carlsen goes knight to g3 first. We have queen to g4. Now again with a very nice threat of just queen captures on g3, because the bishop pins the f pawn. So that's the threat, and now Magnus decides it's time to give back some material to take control of this game. Rook captures on b6. That's the stuff. Now there is no more threat of queen captures here, and you have to decide what you're going to do here. So basically, if you capture the rook, pawn captures, you're just going to face captures, and now yes, you are threatening mate, but there's queen to f1, you can defend mate like this. There's also knight to e1, even better, just nicely defending. You don't have to overcommit with your queen to keep on defending. And here white will just be up a piece, and it doesn't seem very likely that black can somehow get more out of this attack. So Nihal, instead of recapturing, decides we said we're going all out, so we are going all out. Bishop captures on g2. Now with the threat of bishop captures on f3, while still having the option of recapturing the rook. And now what do you do here? Again, it's not an easy decision. For example, if you try something like knight to h2 to force a queen trade, Nihal would happily trade queens, because after captures and captures here, the material is equal, well, pieces wise, but Nihal is also up a pawn. It's a doubled b pawn, but still it's a better position for black. So Carlsen does not have the option of doing anything like this. There is one move that is just excellent for white. So once again, feel free to pause the video and try to find this move that is absolutely best for Magnus, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting black's back rank issues. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's rook to d6, defend and attack. Now black no longer has time to capture on f3 because of rook to d8 check, which will be followed by captures, and queen delivers mate. So Nihal has to do something about this. He could go h5, which seems like a good choice. Maybe he will have the option of going h4 in the future, but he decides for rook to f8 instead, which doesn't really solve any of his problems. Magnus just goes rook to d8, and now he wants to trade. Again, saying you still don't have time for captures here, because if you capture now, it's pretty much the same mate. Captures, and queen to d8 would mate. So Nihal tried g6 here, but now it's far too late. Rook captures on f8, king captures, and now queen to d6 with check. We have king to g8, and now comes knight to h2. Now finally getting the knight out of harm's way with an attack on the queen, queen to h4, and now the calm rook to d1, threatening queen to d8, which will come with check, and the queens are coming off the board. So there's really not much to do here, and well, again, you don't have much time to think. It's a 3-minute blitz game. So bishop to h3 was played, getting the bishop out of harm's way, as the knight is pretty much stuck there defending it. So queen to d8 by Magnus, and this comes with check. You have to trade captures with check, and king to g7, and it's already in this position that you might resign, but it's a 3-minute blitz game. So of course, Nihal Sarin, as he is an extremely fast player, he made a few more moves. Rook to a8, Carlsen played it with h6 defending, rook to b8, now b5, and rook to b6, now going after the a6 pawn. Bishop to e6, preparing bishop to c4 to try and hold at least a little bit. Maybe he can win Magnus against Magnus on time. With a3 defending the pawn, and now h5. And now Carlsen will have to prove his technique, being a rook up. We have knight to f3, knight to h3 with check, king g2, knight f4 check, king to h2. Now there are no more checks here. Knight to d3, going after the pawn, but Carlsen says you have your pawn. Rook to a7. We have knight captures on f2. Now knight to d4. We have knight to g4 with check, king to g2. Now knight to e5. Adding more defenders here to the f7 pawn, and now knight g to e2 by Magnus, just nicely remaneuvering. We have knight to d3, and now king to f3. So here they were extremely low on time, so most of the moves aren't all that impressive. Knight to e1 check, king to e3, and now knight to c2 check. In such severe time pressure, Nihal blunders a piece here, knight captures on e2, and now starts pushing his pawn. Knight c to d4 by Magnus, we have king to h6, we have knight to f4, g5 attacking the knight, knight to h3, we have king to h5, and now knight to f2. Still not resigning, h3. We have rook to a8, now getting the rook behind the king, king h4, and now rook to h8 with check. We have king to g3, and now rook captures on h3 with check. We have king to g2, and here you could deliver a very swift mate with knight to f3. There's not much you can do here. If, let's say, bishop to e6, you're just gonna go knight e1 check, king has to go back, and rook h1 will be mate. But with little time on the clock, Carlsen went for a different idea. Rook to f3 instead. Now we have g4, rook to f4, and now king to g1. And here Magnus just captured the g4 pawn. After king to g1, Magnus just captured the g4 pawn, and it was in this position on move 56 that Nihal Sarin resigned the game. Well, or rather, he lost on time. He didn't resign the game. So here, of course, you are completely lost. After king f1, you are just getting mated. There's nothing you can do here. But all in all, other than all those moves that were made, as it is a game on time, the first some 25 moves after this 23rd move, rook to d6 by Magnus, really impressive stuff. And basically the game was concluded in some 25 moves, which is to be expected when the Evans Gambit is on the board. And either Sarin would have prevailed with his attack on the king side. He didn't want to play against the Evans Gambit directly. He didn't want to accept material and then be under attack. He instead gave up that d6 pawn, started an attack of his own, and in the end it just didn't work out. But this is the kind of game you get when one of the players actually goes for the Evans Gambit, and here we had the privilege of seeing it played on the highest level by none other than world champion Magnus Carlsen. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. A lot of other very interesting openings occurred during the Banter Blitz, so I might show one more game. We'll see if you guys enjoyed this one. But yeah, really impressive stuff. Whenever you see the Joko piano on the board, do go for the Evans Gambit. You will have an awesome time. Maybe not if it's an important classical game, but in an online Blitz game, definitely go for it. So like I said, I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Matijas Jakob, Dario Živanković, Andrew Perry, Owen Wolf, and Alexander Afansiev for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.